1 hour ago, FBI reveals Ellen DeGeneres has fled the country after Diddy's arrest, in a development that's sparking questions across both the entertainment world and the legal community. Sources have confirmed that Ellen DeGeneres has permanently left the United States just days after music mogul Sean Diddy Combs was arrested on a series of federal charges. According to credible reports, DeGeneres has purchased a high-value countryside estate in the United Kingdom and intends to begin an early retirement, stepping away from Hollywood at a moment many are calling too coincidental to ignore. Ellen's sudden relocation comes amid an intensifying investigation into Diddy's alleged operation involving sex trafficking, coercion, and video-recorded blackmail activities that prosecutors claim were concealed behind his high-profile lifestyle and frequent celebrity gatherings. While DeGeneres has not been named in any legal filings, her decades-long public friendship with Combs has placed her under increased scrutiny online, with social media users questioning the timing and motive behind her departure. Diddy has appeared on The Ellen DeGeneres Show numerous times since 2006, often engaging in playful, personal conversations that hinted at a deeper off-camera relationship. Footage from past interviews shows the two exchanging party invitations and inside jokes, with DeGeneres once tweeting a birthday message calling Diddy Cuddle MC Snuggle. Stuff a nickname now being reinterpreted in light of the disturbing nature of the accusations against him. Online investigators have resurfaced these clips, and speculation continues to mount about DeGeneres' potential knowledge of Combs' behavior, especially in the context of the so-called freak-off parties now under federal investigation. Critics are pointing to what they describe as a pattern: celebrities with known ties to Combs quietly distancing themselves in recent months, and, in DeGeneres' case, executing what appears to be a carefully premeditated exit strategy. Her move to the UK, coupled with a final Netflix stand-up special set to air this year, has prompted some to argue that she's orchestrating a career closure under her own terms, possibly before facing further public scrutiny. Meanwhile, the legal case against Diddy is growing. In September 2024, he was arrested on multiple federal charges, including sex trafficking, racketeering, kidnapping, and obstruction of justice. In addition to the resurfacing of damning video evidence showing physical abuse toward former partner Cassie Ventura, the FBI alleges that Combs recorded illicit events at his private gatherings to use as leverage against attendees. Authorities have suggested that a culture of fear, silence, and complicity enabled Combs to sustain a hidden empire of abuse for years, with some of Hollywood's biggest names now being examined for their role as either participants or enablers. Among those names, Ellen DeGeneres stands out not because of what is known, but because of what remains unanswered. While she has maintained her innocence and issued no public statements on Combs' arrest, industry insiders suggest she may be positioning herself for legal protection or narrative control. Anonymous sources close to her inner circle report that DeGeneres began transferring assets and cutting ties as early as mid-2023, months before any charges became public. Some interpret these moves as signs of guilt, others as signs of foresight. As speculation intensifies, one fact remains: DeGeneres is not merely a bystander in this unfolding story. Whether as a former confidant, a possible witness, or simply a public figure navigating fallout, her proximity to Combs places her at the edge of a legal and cultural reckoning. While Diddy fights for his freedom in court, DeGeneres may already be winning a different battle, the battle of timing, perception, and control. The coming weeks may determine whether her decision to leave was an act of retreat or a masterstroke of self-preservation. Until then, the public is left with questions, and Ellen DeGeneres is for now out of reach. As the federal case against Sean Diddy Combs moves forward, new documents and investigative reports obtained by CNN and cross-verified by the FBI are exposing the scale and sophistication of what is now being described as one of the entertainment industry's darkest and most organized abuse networks. While Diddy faces direct charges for crimes ranging from sex trafficking to obstruction of justice, the focus is expanding. The question now is no longer just about his guilt, it's about who knew, who enabled, and who participated. Federal prosecutors allege that Combs orchestrated a covert network that operated under the guise of lavish celebrity events. These gatherings, dubbed freak-off parties, allegedly involved the use of illicit substances, coercion, and concealed surveillance. According to internal FBI communications leaked to the press, multiple victims claim they were drugged, manipulated, and filmed without consent. These tapes, investigators say, were then used as leverage to ensure silence. The legal community is bracing for a wave of subpoenas. A source close to the Department of Justice confirmed that over a dozen high-profile entertainment figures may be called to testify or submit evidence. While no official witness list has been released, names circulating in legal circles include those with long-standing associations to Combs' industry executives, party regulars, and personal confidants. Among them, Ellen DeGeneres remains a figure of increasing public and prosecutorial interest, though no formal allegations have been leveled against her. At the center of this unraveling story is Cassie Ventura Combs' former partner, who filed a landmark lawsuit in November 2023. In it, she accused the music mogul of prolonged physical, sexual, and psychological abuse. What initially read as a personal case quickly escalated into something far more systemic. Ventura alleged that her career and autonomy were controlled through manipulation, threats, and violence. The most shocking development came when Combs settled the case just 24 hours after it was filed, allegedly for $100 million. Legal analysts noted that while settlements do not imply guilt, the speed and scale of the agreement raised serious questions. That skepticism deepened in May 2024 when CNN aired a 2016 surveillance video from a Los Angeles hotel. The footage, which showed Combs physically assaulting Ventura, was quickly authenticated and described by the network as unmistakable. In the video, Combs is seen striking, dragging, and threatening Ventura, contradicting years of denials and public image management. The tape became a turning point, both legally and culturally. The apology video that followed, where Combs claimed to take full responsibility, was widely condemned as performative and insincere, particularly given his legal team's simultaneous efforts to undermine Ventura's credibility. The backlash was swift. Advertisers began dropping partnerships. Collaborators distanced themselves. On social media, users launched campaigns demanding accountability, not just from Combs, but from anyone who may have stood silently beside him. That's where the ripple effect truly began. Clips of Ellen DeGeneres laughing with Combs, exchanging party details on air, and sharing private nicknames were recontextualized. Twitter threads asked why someone so famously inquisitive in interviews never once pressed Combs about the nature of his parties, especially when he himself hinted that they started at midnight and got weird. Viewers noted how in one interview, DeGeneres continued the conversation without pausing, smiling through references that now appear foreboding. But perhaps the most revealing detail was not something said, but something planned. According to property records and flight logs, DeGeneres began steps to move abroad nearly 6 months before Combs' arrest. In legal terms, it's not evidence of wrongdoing, but in the court of public opinion, it looks strategic. In parallel, further allegations continue to surface. YouTuber Jeff WHTK recently shared his first-hand account of attending one of Diddy's private events in 2010. Describing the party as 8 stories of increasing depravity, he claimed that what began as a typical industry mixer evolved into something deeply unsettling. While he maintains he did not engage in illegal activities, his testimony supports the broader narrative that Combs' events were more than just celebrations. They were environments built for control. Other former associates have stepped forward, anonymously describing NDAs, burner phones, and threats. One former assistant described a culture of silence where staff were expected to turn a blind eye in exchange for paychecks and connections. Amid this storm, other celebrities linked to Combs, including Paris Hilton, Kim Kardashian, and even Jay-Z, have remained notably silent. While silence is not guilt, public expectation is shifting. In the era of Twitter Me Too and online transparency, avoiding comment is increasingly interpreted as complicity. DeGeneres, for her part, has issued no statement, taken no interviews, and made no public appearances since relocating. This again has sparked polarized reactions. Some argue she is being unfairly targeted by a narrative driven by internet speculation. Others suggest her absence reflects deeper concerns. One thing remains clear: the Diddy scandal is no longer about a single man. It's about an entire ecosystem, one that rewarded silence, punished dissent, and blurred the line between celebrity access and personal accountability. As the investigation widens, names once thought untouchable are now being reconsidered. Ellen DeGeneres may or may not become a legal subject, but in the court of cultural reckoning, her story is already part of the case file. As the legal machinery tightens around Sean Diddy Combs, the ripple effects have begun transforming the entertainment landscape at large. What once appeared to be a stand-alone scandal has evolved into a moment of reckoning for an entire generation of power figures. The collapse of Diddy's image isn't happening in isolation. It's dragging the reputations of others with it, shaking the foundations of long-protected celebrity circles. Once hailed as a business mogul, tastemaker, and cultural pioneer, Combs built an empire on both mainstream visibility and exclusive access. He bridged street credibility and corporate wealth, transforming Bad Boy Records into a launchpad for music careers, fashion lines, vodka brands, and media ventures. But behind the curated persona, prosecutors now say, was a man obsessed with control, both personal and professional. Recent testimonies allege that Combs' infamous private parties were not simply opulent events, but carefully managed environments where guests were allegedly exposed to manipulated experiences. These allegations describe an ecosystem fueled by substances, secrecy, and power imbalances. Key to that structure, according to the FBI's emerging narrative, were celebrity allies who either normalized the culture or remained silent out of loyalty, fear, or self-preservation. Ellen DeGeneres' relationship with Combs is once again at the center of public conversation, not because of direct involvement in the crimes, but due to her visibility as one of his closest industry peers. Despite her long-standing brand of be-kind optimism, DeGeneres has had to navigate her own controversies, particularly the 2020 allegations of a toxic work culture on her show. Those claims, once dismissed as backstage drama, now appear to some observers as part of a broader pattern: powerful individuals cultivating public benevolence while fostering environments of silence and control behind the scenes. What stands out now is DeGeneres' lack of public support for Combs, even as past interactions suggest a closeness far deeper than professional courtesy. Their mutual party invitations, banter about personal nicknames, and shared appearances on air are being scrutinized not as evidence of complicity, but as signs of selective detachment. Critics argue that the silence speaks volumes, that distancing oneself post facto without offering clarity or comment is a privilege afforded only to those with the means to disappear quietly. Meanwhile, legal analysts and industry veterans note that DeGeneres is playing an entirely different game. Her withdrawal from public life, careful financial movements, and relocation suggest preparation, not panic. In fact, several observers have noted that her exit, far from being a retreat, may represent a calculated pivot. With Diddy's empire under siege, DeGeneres is seen by some as realigning her narrative away from Hollywood excess and toward a more controlled legacy, possibly built on authorship-limited appearances and exclusive content deals. This calculated retreat comes as Diddy's closest allies continue to go silent. Jay-Z, who shared numerous projects, performances, and business ventures with Combs over 2 decades, has yet to issue any public remarks. Other high-profile celebrities known to frequent Diddy's events, including Naomi Campbell, Mariah Carey, and Pharrell Williams, have remained similarly muted. In past scandals, silence was considered cautious. In 2024, amid public demands for transparency, it's often interpreted as complicity, or at minimum, moral cowardice. But as reputations tremble, one unexpected phenomenon is unfolding. Viewers, fans, and digital watchdogs are not merely consuming this story, they are curating it. Social media platforms have transformed into active archives, surfacing clips, statements, and moments from years past to establish patterns and draw connections. In one such viral video, Diddy jokes during a 2010 interview that his parties get different after midnight with no clarification. At the time, audiences laughed. Today, the same footage is being cited as an early red flag, passed over by mainstream media and guests alike. The role of these digital curators cannot be overstated. Their investigations are contributing to renewed calls for justice, media accountability, and structural reform in entertainment power dynamics. They are also forcing legacy names like DeGeneres to reckon with how their past words and associations may now serve as unofficial testimony. Internally, law enforcement is taking notice. Leaked memos from the FBI's internal task force indicate that agencies are actively mapping networks of influence within Diddy's professional and social spheres. One agent reportedly described the investigation as not just about what happened, but about who let it happen. In this environment, Ellen DeGeneres may not be a target, but she is a reference point, a symbol of how closely aligned public image can be with private circles of power, and, increasingly, a case study in how to exit a scandal-adjacent narrative without becoming its casualty. As Diddy's criminal proceedings approach trial, the question for DeGeneres and others becomes sharper. Will they continue to remain silent? Or will their silence itself become part of the evidence? The answer, as always, will not come from statements alone, but from the patterns that led them here. The moment everything shifted came not in a courtroom, not through an indictment, but via a surveillance camera, grainy, unflinching, and undeniable. In May 2024, CNN obtained and aired footage from 2016 showing Sean Diddy Combs physically assaulting Cassie Ventura, his then-girlfriend, in a hallway of a luxury Los Angeles hotel. The tape, long buried and previously unseen by the public, quickly became the centerpiece of both legal action and national outrage. No longer could the narrative be shielded by PR statements or confidential settlements. The truth had a timestamp. The video was a confirmation, not a revelation. For years, whispers and scattered allegations had surrounded Combs, but none had achieved the visceral, inarguable clarity of this footage. Within hours of its release, public figures who had once stood silently began deleting old photos, scrubbing mentions, and pulling down collaborations. Diddy's empire, already bruised by Cassie's lawsuit and subsequent $100 million settlement, began to truly collapse. But even as the focus remained on Diddy, attention returned to those who had been within his orbit. Ellen DeGeneres, who had maintained a visible friendship with Combs across nearly 2 decades, remained absent from any public statement. It was that silence again that began echoing louder than words. The situation reignited viral discourse. Online threads dissected their past interactions. One popular video montage contrasted the CNN footage with clips of DeGeneres and Combs laughing on her show. Viewers fixated on the body language, the tone, the veiled references to Combs' after-parties. In isolation harmless, in context haunting. Behind the scenes, industry insiders were facing tough questions. How did so many people miss what was allegedly happening in plain sight? And more urgently, who else knew? One anonymous former staffer, who worked for an A-list daytime show, said off-record that Hollywood operates on don't ask, don't tell energy. According to them, there was an unspoken rule when it came to certain powerful names, Diddy being one. Everyone knew his parties were not for the faint of heart. You didn't go unless you were either very curious or very protected. This comment reignited scrutiny of what it meant to be protected. For decades, DeGeneres was one of the most insulated celebrities in the business. Major networks, advertisers, and PR teams rallied behind her image. Even when allegations of workplace misconduct surfaced in 2020, the public backlash was fleeting. The infrastructure of her celebrity, built on mass market relatability and daytime dominance, remained largely intact. Now, however, the court of public opinion is far less forgiving. In an era where complicity can be as damning as the act itself, DeGeneres' role is not viewed through a legal lens, but a moral one. Her defenders argue that she's not been accused of any crime. Her critics point to a pattern of alignment with powerful men under fire and a repeated tendency to retreat from scrutiny rather than confront it. What complicates the picture further is the suggestion, still unverified but persistent, that DeGeneres may hold information critical to ongoing investigations. Some speculate that she possesses personal communications party records or testimonies that, if revealed, could change the scope of the case. Others argue she is simply a high-profile witness with nothing to offer beyond surface-level interactions. Either way, her name is being included in the conversation, not because of legal wrongdoing, but because of what her silence represents in the ecosystem of celebrity protection. The FBI, for its part, has not confirmed whether DeGeneres will be called as a witness. However, law enforcement sources suggest that their scope is wide and expanding. Testimonies from survivors have referenced public figures in the room, and internal communications indicate that guest lists from key events are under review. If Ellen DeGeneres is included in those files, she may find herself in a difficult position, one that straddles moral obligation and self-preservation. Thus far, she has chosen to remain overseas, beyond the daily reach of American press and legal pressure. But the internet has no borders, and the demand for answers grows louder with every new revelation. Meanwhile, Combs' legal strategy is under strain. His legal team has shifted from outright denial to procedural defense, challenging surveillance admissibility, and disputing witness credibility. But the damage is done. Public trust has eroded. Industry partnerships have evaporated. And the man once synonymous with celebration and power is now viewed as the epicenter of a cultural breakdown. As more video testimony and documents continue to surface, one thing is clear: the reckoning isn't isolated. It's systemic. The image of a carefully curated celebrity world upheld by producers, agents, co-stars, and friends is unraveling. And Ellen DeGeneres, once seen as a master of narrative control, may have to choose between staying silent or helping reshape a new, more accountable narrative altogether. As the dust begins to settle over what many are calling one of the most consequential scandals in modern entertainment history, a new dynamic is emerging, one that reframes not just the public's perception of Sean Diddy Combs, but also those who stood beside him. Ellen DeGeneres, whose proximity to Combs placed her under intense scrutiny throughout this investigation, is now being discussed not merely as a bystander, but as a case study in reputation management, public silence, and strategic retreat. And, in an unexpected twist, she may be the one left standing. While Combs faces the full weight of the U.S. legal system, his brand imploded, partnerships dissolved, and credibility erased. DeGeneres has, through calculated silence and meticulous repositioning, emerged with her legacy complex but intact. Not unscathed, but unbroken. What distinguishes her trajectory isn't innocence or exoneration, but control. In contrast to Combs' visible unraveling, DeGeneres executed what some insiders are now calling one of the most efficient exits in celebrity history. She left no press conference, no public denial, no counter-narrative. Instead, she withdrew, relocated, and redefined the terms of her visibility. The final act of this 5-part story is not about guilt or innocence, it is about legacy. And in a media ecosystem driven by outrage and attention, DeGeneres has played an unfamiliar but effective card detachment. Her upcoming Netflix special is now rumored to include personal reflections not just on her career, but also on fame fallout and what silence costs. If true, it would mark the first time DeGeneres has directly addressed the cultural moment that engulfed her name. Netflix, for its part, remains silent on the content, but sources close to the production say the tone is mature, stripped back, and unsparing. Legal experts have confirmed that unless new evidence directly implicates DeGeneres, she remains outside the formal scope of the federal investigation. However, media scholars and cultural critics argue that this is not the end of the conversation, but the beginning of a more nuanced one about complicity, public perception, and the ethics of association. In a recent panel discussion on accountability in media, one commentator remarked Ellen's real crime, if any, was the same as Hollywood's at large, knowing more than they let on and saying less than they owed. Yet even this observation leaves room for ambiguity, because unlike many of her peers, DeGeneres may have anticipated the storm and maneuvered accordingly. Her early departure, her asset restructuring, her silence, it now looks less like guilt and more like foresight. Critics argue that foresight does not absolve, but it does distinguish. Meanwhile, the cultural aftershocks of the Diddy case continue. The phrase freak off party has entered mainstream discourse as shorthand for institutionalized abuse hidden in plain sight. New protections are being proposed in industry contracts. Labels and networks are reviewing past NDA practices. A former Diddy collaborator recently announced plans to testify publicly, stating the time for fear is over. It's a movement growing beyond one man's charges. It's about systems, power, silence, and those who learn to navigate them. Which brings us back to DeGeneres. In the final analysis, she may not be remembered for a scandal. She may be remembered for outlasting one. This outcome is not a vindication. It's a redefinition. And in a media world obsessed with clear villains and heroes, DeGeneres now occupies a rare space, a central figure who neither fell nor fled, but recalibrated. She may have left the stage, but she didn't vanish. And when she reemerges, the world may be forced to reckon with a different. Ellen, one who understood the stakes earlier, moved smarter and left the chaos before it reached her door. The story began with a disappearance. It ends with a question. Was Ellen DeGeneres running, or was she the only one who knew when to walk away?